Welcome to episode 21 of the Oh So Spurs podcast, where tonight we're going to be going over the managerial hunt at Tottenham, specifically focusing on the managers Slot, Svensson and Nagelsmann, who are all currently managing in the Bundesliga. And to add to our knowledge, we have a special guest of us tonight, HG from the Cheeseroom. How are you, HG?
I'm doing well. Thank you very much for having me on.
Thanks for coming on. We got Stu from Dubai. How are you, mate?
I'm good. How you doing?
Doing good. We got Deej in Austin. How are you, mate?
I'm doing well.
Sai, all the way over in Basel. How are you, mate?
Hello, mate. Doing well. Thanks, Jim.
And of course, we got Johnny in Dublin. How are you, man?
I'm still basking in Scottish glory, mate.
Bring on
Order, Kelly.
We go ballistic again, lads.
We're going to ask you at the end of the pod what a trophy feels like. Because we want to know. It's been a long time. Mm-hmm. But I thought, should we start with the most prominent name that just keeps coming up? And it's obviously Nagelsmann. It's a name which, when it was first linked with us, everyone thought, wow, why would he be interested in Spurs? But as time has gone on, I think people have started to see that there might be a few chinks in his armour, and there's a bit more of a story behind his end at Bayern Munich and his reputation in Germany. HG, I don't want to put you on the spot too much, but do you want to tell us a little bit about, as someone who follows the Bundesliga, a bit about Nagelsmann as a kind of person and his reputation of being arrogant that seems to be knocking around the place and where that comes from?
Yeah, I don't feel as if he has that reputation within Germany. I will say that. I suspect it might be an English attitude towards Germans in general. But yeah, Nagelsmann obviously was at Hoffenheim to begin with, joined at like 28 or 29. He was supposed to take over at the end of one season, but then the previous manager got sick, and so he took over maybe I think in the February of that year, and he kept them up. I think he won 7 of his 14 games that season. And then from then on, it's always been he's the latest wunderkind, certainly when it comes to managers in Germany. Was there for a few seasons, got Hoffenheim to the Champions League, which is an incredible achievement because Hoffenheim, though they are backed by a massive, I think he's a software developer guy, it's a very small suburb of something outside of Stuttgart. It's not a big place. But yes, he went from there, was successful, went on to Leipzig, which obviously seems to be or wants to be one of the big 2 or 3 teams in German football, and was there for 2 seasons before being plucked away by Bayern. So like the reputation itself is he's obviously done very well, but until he got to Bayern, he hadn't won anything. And although at Hoffenheim, perhaps you won't expect him to win stuff, at Leipzig there may have been the expectation that he would get a cup or he would do something better. The semi-finals of the Champions League was obviously a fantastic achievement for Leipzig, and they definitely suffered because it was the COVID season. So I think when they finally got to play those games, the semi-final, Timo Werner had already left for Chelsea, decided he didn't want to stick around and play those games. So it was a bit unfortunate there. But Nagelsmann's reputation is he changes formations quite often. He'll look at the opponent and try and figure out what's the best way to win the game. And to me, that's a great thing. But the arrogant part, I don't know. I think just he's at Bayern, and Bayern don't take well to young pretenders. Like to be at Bayern and be successful, you have to have a bit of like gravitas behind you. And I don't think Nagelsmann had it, maybe for the players and certainly not for the people in charge of the club.
Interesting. Thanks, HG. And Stu, do you agree with that? Anything you'd like to add from your time following the division?
From what I looked, I found it, quite amazing how flexible he was. I mean, most trainers or coaches have got their kind of fixed formation, which they'll have kind of a one-off depending on the big game, etc. But, having done a bit of research, all his time at Hoffenheim, at Red Bull, at Bayern, he really is super flexible. And it kind of gave me a little bit of hope as if we brought him on board, was with our players who I think we all kind of struggle to think what anyone would do with them. You kind of have more hope than someone like Conte, who's fixed in his formation and won't adapt at all, that he might actually find a way of putting all these pieces together and actually creating, something of a unified formation that actually works.
Interesting. And Deej, you've been doing a lot of homework on Nagelsmann, even to the point of you've been watching some of his old games. So what do you think if he took over the club, it's hard to pinpoint how he would play, but he would ultimately adapt to the players he's got? Or I've heard him say that a number rates the most important part on the pitch. That's about my tactical knowledge of Nagelsmann. But do you have anything else to add?
Yeah, he's definitely someone who is very open to experimenting, but also one who, when something doesn't work, he's pretty quick to figure out it doesn't work. The classic example of that from what I saw was his use of Leroy Sané. Because in the beginning of, I believe it was last season, he tried to deploy Sané out on the right, and Sané's numbers just took a nosedive just because he wasn't able to play in that position because he wanted a player sort of like a Robben type, just someone to cut in on the left and like come that way. But his passing completion numbers took like a huge nosedive. So like after like 3 or 4 games into the season, Nagelsmann brought him back to the left. So like that's like a good example of like him having tactical ideas, but if they don't work, he's not going to just keep plugging away at them and blame the players. He's going to put players in a position to succeed.
That's interesting because I have heard and read stories. I know, and just kind of going back a bit to where you started and where this conversation flowed. Neither of you seem to be insinuating he creates problems with players. He's flexible to adapt to their needs, and the perception of being arrogant is probably a bit specific to the reflection from people who follow the Premier League of him. But I'd also heard there's stories though about him sleeping with the news reporter for Bayern Munich when he was in wedlock, and kind of riding around on a skateboard, acting like I think the quote was he acts like an older, cool brother rather than kind of a mentor or a coaching figure. And then that led to more discontent because then stories were getting out that seemed to be only possible to have come from him to this journalist that he was dating. That caused further rifts, and he didn't seem to really care about what players thought of him. And it all just kind of fell apart for him on a personal level at that point. Is that true from your guys' research, or is that
I mean, the relationship with the journalist, I think, is pretty much true. It's certainly on record that they were in a. I mean, it was no secret, let's say. But yeah, I think that the problem with Bayern is that they're so used to being dominant, and they're so used to like when they had Hansi Flick in charge and they won everything in sight. I didn't get the impression that it was very much a tactical decision from Flick. It was almost like, look, I'm going to put you in a position where you can do what you can do, and you will go out there and win games. And with Nagelsmann, like if he is changing formations for every game at Bayern, like teams do that against Bayern, but they don't expect Bayern to do that. And so I feel as if, yeah, perhaps the younger brother, and he's 2.5 years older than Thomas Müller.
Yeah,
the age I'm sure played a part in it. Because Niko Kovac was there, won the German title, and he's not. I mean, so he was quite young at the time, as far as managers go. I think he's probably about 50 now, but still, you got the impression that Bayern Munich, having been run by Rummenigge and Hoeneß for 20 or 30 years, that this young pretender it just doesn't suit well with Bayern. I think they like the idea of being dominating, but I'm just not sure. Like I've always thought since it happened that maybe getting Nagelsmann wasn't a case of Bayern wanting Nagelsmann for themselves. It was a case of weakening Leipzig more than anything else.
And I was going to introduce you, Sai, just for those who want to introduce a bit of background as to why your input here is going to be very important. Sai has a master's in change management, and he's in a senior leadership position inside a large multinational organization. So he's very used to understanding, and he has a focus on cultures. And I wanted to ask you, Sai, on that point about age. Do you see this in your role? Younger leaders and a stigma that they have to overcome in order to, have the influence they need and the reputation they need to be successful.
I think the answer to that is it depends, because it sort of depends who you're leading at that time. And so if you see a senior leader take a position where another senior leader was expecting to get that position, that becomes quite a difficult relationship to manage, and you have to really work out how are you going to manage that change management, what's your messaging, how are you going to bring those people on board. That tends not to happen so much, I guess, at a footballing level. Some of the reading I've been doing on him for this podcast was, and again, it's sort of, you don't know what's true and what's not true, but apparently he struggled with some of the more senior players there, especially around some of his complicated training sessions that he used to do. So maybe that reflects back to what you were saying there, HG, around in previous managers, it's like, you're great players, you're great at this. This is your space. Do what you need to do in your space. I trust you to do that. And then Nagelsmann comes in and is a little bit tighter around the formation he wants to play, not the formation or formations he wants to play, and maybe struggled to get his message over to some of the more senior players. There was a report that he fell out with Lewandowski before he left quite badly, and Lewandowski was really not into his training sessions. So in terms of coming back to the change management piece, you have to then get to a point where you've got a strong, coherent story as to why this change is the change that is required in the organisation you're in. And getting people to buy into that can sometimes be difficult if you haven't got the success to show as you go through that change process.
Interesting. Thank you, Si. And Johnny,
yeah,
go on, mate.
I don't profess to having any deep insight into German football, but knowing that we were going to do this, I did, like we were supposed to by our teacher, Mr. Goddard, do a little bit of research. So I did read a few interesting articles, and to be honest with you, like the three lads that we were looking into, we're going to be talking about, I knew bits about Nagelsmann, didn't really know anything about the other two, other than they've got their, especially Slot's been mentioned quite a lot in the last few weeks. But there's a particularly good article on Nagelsmann, or I found it's quite comprehensive in its overview, kind of looking at his career. Some of the things that have already been mentioned about his flexibility and his sort of philosophy. And there were a few things that I thought from it that would be encouraging from the Tottenham perspective. As HG said before, obviously about his flexibility with the formations and changing within games as well as just starting lineups. There's an interesting breakdown of his preference initially for a three-man defence. When he was at Hoffenheim, he exclusively used a three-man defence with varying numbers in front. And then when he went to Leipzig, he played 3-4-3 most of the time, and but there was not much difference between 3-4-3, 4-4-2, 3-1-4-2. And then when he went to Bayern, actually a four-man defence became the predominant. It was like 80% of the time he was going with a 4-2-3-1, and then sometimes he was using three. And it was saying that if they had three in defence, it was three in possession, and then whenever they had the ball, when they were out of possession, it was the four at the back. So there's obviously we've seen that with other managers as well, but I think that is just so different from what we've been used to over the last while as Spurs supporters. And we look at our players and we kind of concern about, like the likes of Paro coming in to suit the Conte system and stuff, and what are we going to do with the different manager who plays the different systems. There was another line that said that Leipzig weren't really renowned for their possession, but that he actually pretty quickly turned them into, the phrase was, an elite possession side, which is pretty remarkable to do something like that if you believe the journalist report. The last couple of things I mentioned that I thought were interesting. Apparently, there's a well-known phrase that he says that coaching is 30%. That being a coach is 30% tactics and 70% social competence, and he's really big into the whole psychology of things. And obviously, that would be in keeping, I guess, with the more innovative and probably younger approach, and it's certainly quite different from some of the what we've been used to again at Tottenham. And the last thing I would say, which I also thought was quite encouraging from our point of view, is a quote. It was basically the piece was going through his career, and then it was talking about which clubs he might suit. And the Athletic finished with Julian Nagelsmann as a coach to improve a team at a level below the very elite, rather than win trophies with a side already there. Younger players could be more receptive to his ways than they were at Leipzig and Hoffenheim, which again, we've got the likes of Udogie coming in. There are a lot of younger players. I mean, Romero could do with a pretty strict kind of clarity on what his role involves and stuff. And so I think there's a lot of from what I was looking at, there's a lot there that would be what things we'd be looking for, and that would make a big difference to Spurs. And we know that the players aren't anywhere near as bad as we've been seeing and people might suggest they are. So yeah, I think from what I looked at, and I did do my homework on the other two as well, and to be honest, I think they're all pretty viable candidates. But clearly Nagelsmann's got the success at a higher level and the bigger profile from where he's worked. But I was encouraged by all of them, to be honest with you.
And I think that's where the culture piece then comes into it, Johnny. So you've got the change management piece about where you want to go from and where you want to go to. But then what Levy then has to do is be very, very clear when the announcement comes out about what is the culture we're trying to drive, and absolutely back the manager in that culture journey. So, you can't do what he did before, which was say this is our culture, this is our DNA, and then go and hire 3 managers on the bounce that are just totally counter to the culture, because everybody just looks at that, and not just the fans, but everybody in the club just looks at it, and it just has no credibility. And if you've got no credibility from the top, that's where I get some of the negativity and the footballing decisions that Levy's made over the last maybe 8 to 10 years. You can really slate him for that. I'm not sure about the business stuff before that, but certainly in the last 8 to 10 years, the way that he's underinvested and then not really led from the front in terms of what is the culture and strategy for the footballing side, I think he's got all of that laying at his feet, to be fair.
The only thing I'd say is my reservation with him still, despite all this, pretty good feedback, I think it's fair to say, and an over-the-top reaction to him being an arrogant arse, as he does seem like the character who will front up to Levy if he doesn't get the necessary support he needs. And The Athletic did a really good article on young managers versus old managers and how some managers like Hodgson find these late flourishes in their career and do really well, and how other young managers fizzle out. And they found that with the young managers, one of the things that really holds them back is when the CEO isn't a strong character and isn't seen as standing by their side, because they need that kind of level of authority from someone else in the business to make them feel protected from the players and any pushback. And if he doesn't get that from Levy, I just worry he'll front up to him. But my gut is Levy's going to want Nagelsmann more than anyone else, because getting a big manager in does elevate the status of Tottenham. And it is is Daniel Levy getting his willy out and giving it a wave and saying, look at my big manager, look how big he is. And I do think there's a little bit of him having his ego attested to with a big name. And we've seen it with Conte and Mourinho. That's my devil's advocate feedback on it.
I think
anyway,
that's actually a really interesting point you made about needing a CEO or like a board member or whatever to back them against the players. I think that could be one of the explanations for why things went wrong at Bayern, because I think it's pretty clear that from everything that's been said by everyone in like the upper management at Bayern, that they backed the players over Nagelsmann pretty consistently. I know that if I remember reading correctly, there was another cause of fallout was because Nagelsmann fired the goalkeeping coach or something, and that caused a rift between him and Neuer. And if you are going to make those kind of moves and then not be backed by management, like upper management, I don't know how you can be successful, especially in a club with personalities like Bayern's.
Well, I guess actually to counter. Oh, God, sorry, Stu.
I was going to say, I think Oliver Kahn didn't really support him either, did he? Which is one of the reasons why he got pushed out. Oh no, I could be mistaken. But
and that's really interesting, because if you're in any other organisation and you're going to dismiss your, regional sales, national sales manager, you probably align with your sales director before you do that, and you wouldn't go against all of that advice if it was there. So it makes you wonder what led to that situation.
Yeah. I guess on the flip side, though, to counter that, where I've just kind of said maybe Levy and him won't be a good match in that sense, Levy did actually stick with Conte right until the end. Like, it sounded like Levy was the one going, are you sure you don't want to come back? Please come back. Are you sure you don't want to come back? I'm still backing you. I'm still backing you. I'm still backing you. When he'd completely lost the dressing room. So maybe they will be a good match.
If you remember when Poch had his issues with the senior players, Levy stood by him as well. So
people will be screaming at their mics, their phones now, saying, "Didn't back him for 2 windows, though. How could you say that, Stu?"
Yes, Stu.
Sorry, lad.
Bloody Levy lover, you.
Yeah.
No, they have got a point. To be fair, like there's Levy's. I do think he's, for all his strengths of business, goes a million times. In terms of human emotional intelligence, that doesn't seem to really exist within his realm. We did the ENIC pod at HG. You obviously weren't on that one, but we were with David Kenner, and he was a member of the trust, and he met Levy on a few occasions. And he just said he's the type of character that, you make a joke and there's just this stone cold, I don't compute. What's a joke?
Yeah. So,
like,
but then the question, the question then is, does the new structure make a difference? Because Levy will be further away from the footballing side in this new structure. If everything that we're led to believe with Munn, and there's going to be a new director of football comes in underneath him, so it'll be Levy -3 then at that point, will he, the manager?
Yeah. I see Levy as basically wanting to spend the rest of his days at the Bahamas right now. I mean, it's to be involved with the football side of things at Spurs. I don't feel like he's ever really wanted to do that. He's always tried to employ people with a great track record, whether it's based on their CV, with Van Gaal getting the nod before Pochettino. Like, he's always tried to go with someone even when he signed Ramos. Like, Ramos was the big name who'd won a Europa League with Sevilla. Like, who was Martignol compared to this, as far as he was concerned? So, like, when I listen to Daniel Levy, I don't think I see someone who is a massive football fan or who knows football, but I think he knows that. I've always felt that way about Levy, and he's tried to employ people in. And so if getting Scott Munn in means that there's another layer, because right now he's still getting it in the neck. And for many Spurs fans, it doesn't matter what the players do. It doesn't matter what the coach does. Like, I see people blaming Daniel Levy all the time that we haven't sold certain players over the last few years, as if, like, Daniel Levy is the director of football. Well, we've employed a director of football to do those things. So he's getting it in the neck regardless. I feel like an extra level, people maybe swallowed it and said, hey, Scott Munn's coming in. This is what we want. This is what we want to see from Daniel Levy. But I genuinely think that maybe he would rather focus on the goods yard and all the other projects to do with Spurs right now.
Yeah, I think that's fair feedback. Although I think some would say
on that. Sorry.
Yeah, go on, Johnny. Go for it,
again, like I'm certainly not a rabid ENIC out, Levy out, or anything like that at all. But I had always thought that Levy, although I think she's probably correct in terms of selling players as well and buying players. Thinking of selling players, like we've sold some players. Who's the lad we sold to Stoke a couple of years ago? Midfielder Wimmer, was it Wimmer? And we got a ridiculous amount. Yeah, we got a stupid amount of money for him, which was ridiculous. Like, Stoke were totally sold down the river there. It was a beautiful deal. And Levy's kind of like credited when it comes to the negotiations between clubs, when it comes to the ins and outs. So I'm just wondering, like, what is there not a legitimate criticism of him when it comes to interference with, like, when we say yes and when we say no, the likes of the Grealish that we probably, we would certainly regret, and we end up with whoever, Jack Clark or somebody else instead. Like, so is that not true? I mean, it's not like he's just staying in his office all the time. He is actually screwing things up for us as well, isn't he?
You are right, but you are right, and I do think there's a middle ground here where he's trying to distance himself, but he can't help but have a finger in the pie and be involved. Yeah. He just can't fully let go. But I'm just conscious the main topic of the pod is we want to make sure we have time to go over Arne Slot and Svensson as well, and we're diving into the never-ending Daniel Levy debate. So we'll park that one, and if we have 5 minutes left at the end, we'll use it as filler content. Because I'm really interested in the next two people as well, and I think, like some of us said, I started off fully Jurgen Nagelsmann in. He's the guy. But the more I hear about Arne Slot, the more I'm getting quite excited about this guy and thinking, is this a buy? Right, I'm going to start with you, Stu, because of your Dutch affiliations. If that's just the most pathetic way of selecting you, sorry. But are we just getting overly excited because he's got an accent like Martin Jol? Or is there a lot going on with this guy?
I mean, obviously, you never know. I mean, the Eredivisie is very different to the Premier League. The way teams set up is very different to the way teams will set up against us in the Premier League. That said, he's managed two teams which are not known or really expected, no matter what Feyenoord fans think every summer, to actually win the title.
Sounds
Feyenoord,
familiar.
yeah, but Feyenoord, they come from Rotterdam. It's the biggest city in the country, but they aren't particularly good, and they win a title probably on average once every 10 years. It's usually Ajax, PSV every now and then, and then in the recent years, someone like AZ has done well. But when he was at AZ, Slot did a really, really good job. He had the best points per game average of any manager in their history. The only reason he got fired was because they got the hump with him because he agreed to join Feyenoord the following year. It wasn't because of bad results. They just, got annoyed that he'd basically given up on them and was leaving them. And he probably, you never know, but the year of the COVID year, where the league was obviously ended, he was level on points with Ajax. And, he would have definitely won, manager of the year that year, and likely could have won the actual title, which would have been a remarkable feat with AZ. And at AZ, he was playing 4-3-3 in that year. And then he changed the following year to a 4-2-3-1, which he then also implemented at Feyenoord. And at Feyenoord, I think he increased their points total 12 points year on year in his first season, took him to the final of European, tournament. This year again, he was 1 minute from knocking Mourinho out. He's going to win the title. They lost in the semi-final of the Dutch Cup to Ajax, but they were the better side in that game. He's done an absolute remarkable job. And HG recently shared with me a clip of an interview that he did. And after seeing that, he is desperate to come to the Premier League. And all the rumors about that he doesn't want to leave because of his family, etc. It's not true. He's said that he'd be willing to go to Italy or Spain, but his preference is the UK. He wants to come in the Premier League. He turned down the other Premier League teams, a couple of months ago, but that was obvious because we're talking about someone like Leeds, and he was fighting for the title with Feyenoord. But he is desperate to come this summer, and in that interview, he refused to commit to next season with Feyenoord. So I think he could do a really good job, and he sees us as a step up. Which, referring to Nagelsmann, my fear is after you've managed a team that's expected to win, which, is head and shoulders above all the other teams in the league, he will come to us and he'll come with enthusiasm like all managers do, like Conte did, like Mourinho did, and after a few months get frustrated. Whereas I think Slot will come in with more enthusiasm, and we'll give it more time. So, yeah, I think he could do a job.
Really interesting. Did anyone else have any comments to add on him? Because he's definitely, the more I hear about him, the more my tummy, get a little tickle of excitement that this guy might be the one.
I'd not really heard much of him until we started talking a couple of weeks ago. Did a little bit of reading, and there's not that much out there about him. And Stu, I think you've summed up pretty much most that's out there. My worry is that Levy looks at him and says that's underwhelming. That doesn't scratch the potch itch for the Spurs fans. I think that's a Levy thing, right? I'm not saying that he couldn't do a job for us, and what he's done at AZ and Feyenoord is phenomenal. But if he comes and doesn't hit the ground running, I wonder how much time he gets before it's like, well, it's just another. And that Poch thing is, if Poch lands at Chelsea, I think that Nagelsmann is the only one that scratches that itch for Levy. And I think that's an issue for us, and I think that maybe clouds the judgment a bit.
If you go back into, I always talk about 2014 because I feel like it's a very similar situation. We've got a massive squad, and the new manager's got to come in and decide who he wants to keep around. But back in 2014, Spurs fans, from what I remember, they wanted Van Gaal first, and if they didn't get him, they wanted Frank de Boer from Ajax.
Yeah.
Because he'd won 4 titles in a row, I think, in the Dutch league at that point.
Fair point.
And we can look back now and say, actually, as much as Pochettino, I was underwhelmed, to be fair, when we got Pochettino.
Yeah.
It turned out to be the right move. And I think it was maybe just a force of character, getting young players, as we had a young squad back then. And maybe Slot is more suited to be that person. You know, obviously he played at a high level in Dutch football. He played in the Eredivisie for a long time, not for a massive club, but he's been a professional footballer for a very long time. And it's all about, can you get the players to buy into what you're selling? Now, obviously, if you've got a name, then maybe that will be easier. But I think if the players are enjoying training, then they'll go out and they'll enjoy the games too. And I think Arne Slot has come out and said many times that with Feyenoord, it's all about getting them to be brave and to be on the ball. And like they have a midfielder, their captain, who basically looks like the Turkish Højbjerg. I mean, it's basically the same person. But he's only 22 and he runs their games. Every single time I see them play, you think, well, this guy has always been on Feyenoord's books. Feyenoord did their own kind of Amazon documentary a few seasons ago when Advocaat was in charge. And I watched the whole thing. And he was coming through the youth ranks then, getting into the first team. And he felt like this is a guy that they're going to build around. And Arne Slot has seen that and done that. And there are clear, I think, people at Spurs that Slot will look at and say, this is who I want to build my side around. And so I like him because he may not be as jovial as Martignol, and he may not be as comfortable in English as Martignol at cracking jokes, but I definitely feel like he's got the personality that would fit. I don't think he would be fazed by it. And that's weird. When you know a person who's managed, AZ's probably the fourth biggest team in Holland, and then he's gone to the third biggest team in Holland. I suspect AZ didn't like him because they didn't think Feyenoord was much of a step up as far as they were concerned. So he's come in and he's just decided, this is what I want to do. He's a very confident person. And I think that when you listen to him, even when he speaks in English, there's little fear. Like the question comes in and he just responds as if it's the most natural thing in the world. And that can only, I think at least, if I had a leader like that in my job, I would absolutely just listen to them because I would trust they know what they're talking about.
Yeah, and the thing, I'm with you, HG, on that one about when Poch came in. I think we're all somewhat underwhelmed. And it was a bit of a, like, who is this guy? What is he about? He'd done a good job at Southampton, but really not that proven. But I think what Poch did was raise that bar about where we expect to be. Because pre-Poch, we weren't knocking on the door for the title. We weren't in the Champions League final. We weren't in those places that Poch took us to. And I mean, I don't know Arnie. I don't know him from Adam. I don't know Nagelsmann much from Adam, but I'm worried that clouds Levy's judgment, if you like, that he wouldn't go for somebody that could be a great fit for the team, given that he still wants winner.
So maybe we can hope that Nagelsmann says no, just like Hakal did, and we end up going further down the list and striking lucky again. I don't know.
Maybe.
I found a couple of things similar to the Nagelsmann research I did. A few things that haven't been mentioned already. HG there mentioned Advocaat, who was the manager before. I remember he was at Rangers actually back in the day. But apparently he played a low block and sort of much more defensive system. But quite quickly Slot was able to work with the same players and was able to have them playing on like a high press, building up for the back. What I liked, you know, when you're watching Spurs and you're, especially from where I am and quite high up, and I can see like the opportunities for passes from midfield that are just never made. And apparently the way Feyenoord play is that he likes his players to make risky passes between the lines, and it's just something like you just don't see very often happening with Tottenham. It happens like the Man United, like you can actually name it, when Højbjerg passed the ball through against United when we won 6-1, like you know it happens about 3 or 4 times a season if you're lucky. And you know, I think that I just as a supporter, I'd love to see that. I'd love to see a high press. I'd love to see the energy that it sounds like Slot's teams play with. Though he plays 4 at the back, apparently the fullbacks push up high, but so you sort of think, okay, well, we just need to teach Porro how to defend, and then we'll be all right. You know, so there's not much to worry about there. But I just thought it's the things I was reading were just really positive, and there was a reference to Bielsa that he's been likened to Bielsa, which is quite interesting, obviously with the Pochettino connection and with Bielsa as well. Just like I know that when Bielsa was at Leeds, it was all a bit kind of it's a bit chaotic, really, wasn't it? Like just really, really high scoring games, and I don't know, that would be better than the stuff we've been watching most of the last few years. But the last quote I found, which I thought was interesting, was he likes positional fluidity and high tactical intelligence. I hope our players can manage to cope with that and understand what he's talking about. He might need, a few interesting diagrams to be kind of decoded, but yeah, it's like certainly again, it's just somebody who's quite different from what we've been used to, and I think that's what everyone's looking out for, really, after the last few years.
Was it Harry Winks who was scared of tactics in the Amazon documentary? I hope he's not tactical and stuff. When he says something like that. Anyway, sorry.
Right.
One thing that I saw with Slot, before we move on, is he likes to play in possession, especially in build up. He likes to play a back three of the two center backs and the goalkeeper, and I just think that would be really funny to watch with Lloris as the goalkeeper. We'll get Lloris and Dyer as two of our back three playing balls around our penalty area. We would concede 8 goals a game.
Jesus, it's as I keep saying, if I see us mentioned in the media with anyone but a goalkeeper or a centre back at the moment, I just lose my shit, and I'm seeing all the £50 million of Madison stuff starting again, which is riling me up. But that's another topic.
I'm excited for. I saw that we had scouts watching Lyon the other day, looking at Castello de Queiva, who's really young. I don't know how he would pair next to Romero, because I know we think that he needs like a veteran presence next to him. But man, he's a very bright prospect, and one that I would be happy for us to go for.
Interesting. Well, we will go on to these final topics at the end of the pod, because we've got one more manager to talk about first, and also to mention Chelsea are losing 3-0, which is
unbelievable.
If only the season wasn't 5 games longer, they would get relegated. Very frustrating. But and Arsenal are going to get their hopes up, and then when they bottle it, it's going to be even funnier now, because they're actually the hopes
Is
back.
Frank going to get fired?
Well, do you? And okay,
bring in Conte.
We need to go on to Svensson. Is that how I pronounce it? The next manager.
Yeah, both Svensson. Yeah.
I am a bit suspicious that Poch still hasn't announced if he's looking at this and going, "Oh shit, this."
It has been quite a while, hasn't it? Because it was, it was
a done deal.
Yeah, Romano was all over that. It's like it's imminent, and now it's like, well, maybe it's not so imminent.
If he cocks his next roll up, his reputation's really in the mud. He's got to go back to kind of managing a non-elite football club. So I do wonder if he's looking at it like, oh, maybe I shouldn't. Maybe this one's a bit too much. But anyway, we also just want to quickly finish off on Svensson. So, funnily enough, this name's been linked quite regularly over the last couple of days. But HG, you have been saying, rather than going for today's Julian Nagelsmann, you could get the next Julian Nagelsmann for who's way out the limelight. Is that a fair assessment?
Yes, I mean, I'm definitely a bit nervous now that it's being linked. I'm like, who is tapping into my phone and seeing my messages? But it's weird. So, Bo Svensson, Mainz were in trouble a few seasons ago. They were deeply in relegation trouble around December, January time, and they needed someone else. And he'd played for Mainz for many years. And he was, I think, coaching in the Red Bull system. So, Red Bull Salzburg have a second division team in Austria that they basically run, and he was coaching them. So it's almost like Red Bull reserves. And they went and got him, and they said, "Hey, no, we want you to be our head coach for our main side." And since then, I mean, he's stabilised them. I can't say much more than that. I think they finished 12th in his first full season after he kept them up, and I think maybe 8th or 9th last year, and they're doing around the same this time. But they're winning more games than they're losing. And in the Bundesliga, that will get you to mid-table quite easily. And I put it nicely, the players they have, I'd be surprised if people here can name more than 2 of them. Maybe even that many. I only know one because he's Austrian. So they are overachieving, I would say, drastically with the players that they have. Now, the type of football that they play probably changes on opponent, and is definitely, with it being in the Red Bull system, that they've always done that high press ever since Rangnick set the whole thing up 5 or 6 years ago. I just think that if you're going to look for someone who won't have maybe the pressure that Nagelsmann would bring, I think the media might leave us alone a little bit. If it's someone they don't know much about, maybe I'm being wishful thinking here. Maybe they'll just go after him from day one because he's not Frank Lampard or someone who knows the league or any kind of nonsense like that. But I just think that as far as German football goes, as much as Oliver Glasner won the Europa League with Frankfurt, Svensson to me would feels a different kind of candidate. He's a lot more charismatic than Glasner is. Glasner's a very dour Austrian, looks like an Andy Müller regen. But I think as far as the Bundesliga is right now, like obviously Nagelsmann's out of work, but Bo Svensson would be the one to go for, the let's say the logical choice from that league.
Interesting. Anyone else have anything to add on him? I know he was a bit of a last-minute addition to the pod, but Johnny, did you manage to?
Yeah, I got a few notes here.
Oh yes, come on, mate, let's hear it.
Well, I didn't realise.
DJ's going for your spot, mate.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'm happy, man.
Gunning for you.
I didn't realize because you hear obviously. I knew that he obviously Tuchel and Klopp had been manager at Mainz, but I didn't realize that Svensson had actually played under them both, and he'd apparently played under Roy Hodgson as well when he was in Denmark at Copenhagen. So he's actually like learned from some pretty impressive coaches, and he's paid testimony to the influence that they've had on him. So like that's some pretty decent pedigree that he's coming from as a player. And apparently I didn't know this at the time, but I think it was another Athletics article from 2022. But when Potter left Brighton, he was very heavily linked with the Brighton job, apparently, for fairly obvious reasons in terms of the sort of level of coach that they'd be looking for, and also the sort of football that they play. So when you look at what Brighton are doing now and the fact they went for De Zerbi, but if he was being considered, that again would be quite an encouraging thing, I would think. And yeah, again, thinking about the Spurs, from the Spurs perspective and what sort of rung true with me and thinking about our situation, apparently when he joined Mainz, they were really bad defensively. And then he brought in a back three. And then their goals per game that they were conceding went from 2.2 before he came in to 1.25, and that was the second best in the whole of the Bundesliga.
We need some of that.
So that's pretty damn impressive as well. I'm sure DJ will enjoy the fact that they have a very high XG, because I know he's big on the XG from a couple of days ago in the old WhatsApp chat. And what else was there's? Oh yeah, was it? No, is there anything else? Maybe that was it. Maybe yeah. So the old Gegen pressing, well, that was really what HG was talking about. In terms of Spurs, I just wonder, like, do we need to have a creative player? What do we do in terms of his system? If he's playing like a 3-4-1-2, that's not a system that I can remember us playing at all. Like how and obviously he can switch things around if he did come into Tottenham, but I'm just wondering again about you've got this sort of similar situation that you have with the slot, and okay, you've got the fullbacks pushing up if you've got four at the back, or what do you do with their ability to defend, and do we need if you're playing two up top with one behind, do we need a player in who's going to be able to do that, or do you drop Kane back into behind a front two? Do you try and get Heel going in there again, or do we get in a Maddison or something like that? So I don't know in terms of the personnel we've got. Hopefully somebody who's got far more intelligence than me when it comes to football or life in general can look at it and see solutions. But yeah, it's certainly, again, 3 out of 3 are certainly very, very valid candidates from what I can see, and they're also a hell of a upgrade on the sort of the product that you are going to be enjoying on a weekly basis, and that is what we are just desperate for. Ultimately, we want success, of course, and these guys have got a serious claim to also bringing us in the right direction from that point of view too. So, to be honest with you, if you said any of them, I would be very happy from what I've amazing research.
One thing that another answer to who could be our creative player is we could kind of do what happened in a dream I had of a game we played this weekend. I know we didn't play it all, but when we played this imaginary game, after a pretty poor start, one of the tactical changes our manager made, I know, a manager making tactical changes, imagine that, was we had Kulusevski dropping deeper and more central. And I know that he, during his time in Italy, played not like a major amount, but he did spend some time more central. So that could be another potential fix to our like creative midfield player if we decided to switch to a 3-4-1-2. Stu could probably talk more about that.
Yeah, he did it at Parma for a while, but I remember him saying when he joined us that that's actually his preferred position.
Yeah. And imagine that, right? So we go with 3 in the middle and we stop getting over a run. Who knew?
No way.
Who knew? Jesus Christ.
None of us knew that.
None of us.
It's
None of
like,
us ever
tactical genius from Ryan.
Give it size at end of the season.
I think whoever the next manager comes in, it's weird. Like I think we all think that we've got some very good players in Spurs' books.
Yeah.
Whether they're at the club now, whether they're out on loan, but there's a whole bunch of players that someone with, I would say, a decent sized brain could figure out this will work. And you know what? If this 11 doesn't work, I can make 1 or 2 changes, create a completely different 11, and it still might work. And so, like, it's to me that the next manager, I'm not fussed about their CV so much. I'm really not. I'm fussed about whether I think they can create a team from what we've got, and weirdly, how quickly they can get the fans behind them. Because if they don't have that CV that maybe Nagelsmann does, then that's going to be crucial. Because as we sadly know, if it's someone comes in who doesn't have the CV, I imagine there's going to be a number of fans who will not be happy and who will wonder why we haven't got the managerial equivalent of Bastoni or Skriniar, whoever it is that they've moaned that we haven't signed. But if Nagelsmann turns us down for whatever reason, then we are left with the Clement Lenglet's of managers, right? The next one in line. And so I hope that whoever comes in has the force of nature to see that, this is what Spurs are, right? We're a top 6 club, a top 10 club in the world, but we are a bit of a shambles and we need organising first and foremost. So I hope that if it's one of those 3, then brilliant. If it's someone else, fantastic. But I'm less worried about kind of how they're going to play, but I just want to know that they know what they can do with the players that they've got. Yeah. Like Spurs will have money to go out and buy 1 or 2 players and could easily be in the 30, 40, 50 million pound bracket again like last summer, but we have to get the right ones. We have to get the ones where all of us know centre-back is crucial, absolutely crucial. So
I mean, you've got Dyer coming on a new contract.
Too, right? I don't. I really am less worried about the X's and O's and more about do the players like this person? Do the fans like this person? Because the players themselves are good enough to win a bunch of games. What they need is guidance.
And do you think then, HG, that if that person comes in and gets them playing with a bit of Tottenham DNA from the start, we get on side, right? We lost 4-3 at the weekend, but I think everybody watched that game and thought, Jesus, first 15 minutes were absolutely awful. But for the next 75 minutes, we played them off the park.
Yeah, I think most of us sitting here doing this pod remember Spurs when pretty much all we had was this belief that we might win today. There was no expectation. We knew we could beat anyone if we played well, but we expected that we probably wouldn't. Right? And so if you have that in you at some point, you have to then think, right, I want to, I know Spurs have I don't say very good squad, but a number of very good players. And it's all about finding a system. Pochettino found a system that worked with the players he had. And that is incredible. And I don't think I'll ever see anything quite like that, really. But managers can do it. Yeah. I don't see it as this, we can't do anything unless we spend another 300 million. To me, that's not how it works.
But then we don't win the transfer market.
Yeah.
I don't win the Twitter transfer market competition.
But I trust myself.
The thing I find promising that this time, as opposed to the Nuno summer, was all the players that we seem to be linked with all have a similar DNA and approach to the game, which is fits with our DNA and what we're looking for, as opposed to that summer when, you know, they had Ten Hag with his style, you had Fonseca with his, you had Nuno, you had Gattuso. There was no clear idea of what we were trying to do. As opposed to this time, there seems to be a proper football philosophy behind what we're trying to do. So, you know, maybe I'm being too optimistic and being a Levy lover, but
No,
you know, it is, you know, giving me hope.
I agree.
Yeah,
with
no, I
that.
definitely think that the overall direction of the manager search has been honestly better than I expected. Remembering how the last 1.5, I'm not going to call the Nuno to Conte thing a search because let's be real. When that happened, we just rang him up and refused to leave until he signed, probably. But the last manager search was absolutely awful, and based on how this one's going, it just kind of reinforces my idea that Don Fabio did not have the principles in mind that Tottenham needed, and the combination of the people that he's left behind, because just because Paradici's gone does not mean that the people that he hired, the system that he put in place, isn't still there. Like, we obviously, like, it's not just, now that he's gone, it's not just Levy sat alone in a room with only a monitor on in his underwear, just scrolling down Twitter, trying to see who the biggest name is. Those people plus Levy plus Munn seem to have a much clearer idea. And to go back to what HG said, I definitely agree that I think the biggest part is to get the players on side. Fans, very important, but like realistically, if the players are on side, they'll play well. They play well. Fans will. Fans will
Exactly.
Oh,
It's a chain
yeah, of
reaction,
course.
isn't
Yeah,
it?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
100%.
yeah. So to paraphrase someone that I know, I think I'm about 30% worried about the tactics, 70% about the social competence.
Yeah, I fully agree with
But
that.
of those
Obviously,
three names, I think I'm happy with any of them.
we've got time as well, right? Whether we like it or not, there's nothing to play for this season apart from whether you as a fan are bothered about being in Europe or not, and that's a very individual thing. Some people, it's a thing they don't want because they have ambitions that they feel we should be challenging for the top two, and it's a distraction. Others say no, a trophy's a trophy. We want to. You know, we want to be in Europe. We're Tottenham Hotspur. It's our heritage. Others say I'm a season ticket holder. I don't want to be going on a Sunday. Others say I want to go to more games. I want to be in Europe. It's all very individual, but ultimately there's nothing really to worry about in terms of what we've got to play for now. So we may as well do proper due diligence over the next 2 months. Get the right director of football, get the right manager, get the right culture, get a philosophy back, and have the players actually excited to play for this club again and actually want to be
I would
here.
like to have a
Well, we've
manager
seen
get
already
full
like
off-season.
what happened at Anfield. I mean, we said it on that little Twitter chat that we had at the time. You know, that would not have happened under Stellini. So it's only taken Mason to come in, his second game in charge, and it was a totally different sort of mentality in the way that we played. The first 15 minutes was the same, but like the majority of the game, we've seen players playing in ways from a positive point of view that we have not, especially like Sonny is looking just basically like not far off the Sonny from last season and now, which is remarkable considering how horrific he was and how poor his confidence was for most of this season. And we were all like saying he's got to be dropped, you know. It's just like kind of insane really when you think of how talented a player he is. So that's fantastic in itself, just that one nugget. But there's been a lot more than just that.
You talk about playing through the lines, Johnny. That first goal, the passing for the first goal and the ball out to Perisic was phenomenal. It just Liverpool didn't know where to go with it. They were stood watching it.
Well, people, there's other podcasts out there, and I know we were all entitled to our own opinions, but I can't understand how the rinsing that Skip gets from some directions. I mean, even that pass aside, just his work rate, his effort, his like the spirit that he showed when we were 3-0 down, and it was the same against Newcastle. I think that the graft that he's putting in and the like desire. Obviously, he's a Spurs lad, and it's so evident when you're watching him. He's sick. He's raging. He's like just putting everything. His whole heart is going in. And as a supporter, there is nothing more that you want to see than that. And it's not like he's just a body flying around. I think he gets a poor. I think he gets knocked unfairly when it comes to his actual technical ability. Yeah, he's not a Bentancur, but he's He's not that. He does pass the ball forwards as well.
I agree with that, and that's why I was baffled and still can't believe people side with Conte when during his little rant he was claiming every single player was selfish, etc. There's no way that could be accused.
Absolutely.
Skip could be accused of that. No way in hell.
No. Yeah.
It feels like at Tottenham we love those extremely gifted flair players, or we love those players that can't do anything but kick people. And if you're somewhere in the middle, you're just
no man's land.
Do? Yeah, and Skip is somewhere in the middle. He's very good at lots of things. Like, he's never going to be a Maddison, but we don't want him to be a Maddison. Like it is true. You're very right about Skip that. For a midfield player to come through, I think he's levels above Winks, and Winks played in the first team for a number of seasons.
He was in England squad regularly.
He's still only 22.
Yeah.
So it's rough that we've got I mean, even if you include Højbjerg, you've still got Bentancur and Bissouma who are probably better on the ball than Skip is, but you can't just have those kinds of players. You do need someone who's going to do the dirty work. And like Skip may not be a Stefan Freund or a Graham Roberts or whoever we want to go back in time for, but you need players like Skip. And certainly, bearing in mind his value as homegrown, club-grown, whatever you want to call it, sod that. He's there because he's good enough. I really believe that.
Exactly. And Man United won the league of John O'Shea, Johnny Evans. There's tons, the Raphael twins, so many players that people go, oh, the average or the mid-table, because they had the right personality, the right attitude, they're adaptable, they fit the culture, they add to the dressing room. I just find it mind-boggling that anyone can boo anyone that is proud to wear the shirt and giving 110%. If they're not good enough in your eyes, that's not their fault. They're not picking themselves. They're working as hard as they can in training and being picked by someone else. And if the club doesn't have a better option than them, that's not their fault. What do you want to do? Boo them on the pitch and get someone shitter on? I don't know what the outcome is that people are after when they start doing that. It's bizarre.
I would like to add one more type of player that Tottenham fans love is the player who comes in, is absolute shit, and then becomes slightly not shit. We eat those players up. Sissoko, Lamela, Emerson, all those. We love ourselves a cult hero.
HG's fighting his tongue right now.
Which one are you biting your tongue about? Lamela. Oh, you hate Lamela, don't you? Yeah. Lamela's your
biggest
DJ's
wage thief in Spurs.
I love Lamela.
8 years of sitting on a bench or in a hospital bed. Eric Lamela.
Wasn't there rumours though that it wasn't injuries, that he had his dog died, they said, but there was like a bit of a random excuse. The reality was I had no idea this is true. There was issues with his brother, but there was a drug issue somewhere in the family, or he had one, and the club, to wrap him up in cotton wool, kind of said, oh, his dog's died and he doesn't want to talk to anyone at the moment. He's indefinitely on leave. But I think the biggest disappointment with him was he was meant to be Gareth Bale's heir. And we saw these videos of this guy from Roma and we were like, fucking hell,
he was amazing.
Gareth Bale's heir. And then we were like, how have we signed a defensive winger? He's meant to be, like Dirk Kuyt was a defensive forward. I kind of found Lamela was a defensive winger. And you're like, I don't want this. I want him to beat 3 players and score a Rabona. And which he did twice, to be fair.
So, did you see the latest bit of the latest 2 Spurs players that have left to win a trophy? Vincent Janssen scored in the Belgian Cup final. Yesterday.
Bergwijn came a penalty shootout away of getting the Dutch one.
So Vincent Janssen and Tobes won the Belgian Cup. So they're the latest 2. I think it's about 120 players have left Tottenham and won silverware since we last won silverware.
Yeah, even Kevin Wimmer lost the Austrian Cup final. He could have got there.
Is he still walking, let alone playing?
He's only 30.
Is he really?
No.
My goodness, no.
30. Yeah.
It's not Kevin Wimmer Jr., is it?
No. It's weird. Like when he went to Stoke and he got a 5-year deal, and within about 6 months they switched managers, and that was that for him. And he was on loan for a number of years all over Europe, and he signed for one of the Vienna sides.
Oh my goodness!
So I was kind of excited to see him at home. Yeah. And he was in the side for about 4 months and then couldn't get back in again. So I was surprised to see him even start the cup final because he didn't play the semi-final that I went to. But yeah, there was I think Rapid's centre-back duo for the cup final Sunday night was ex-Spurs in Kevin Wimmer, and the other guy is a Spurs fan. Like, he's outed himself as saying he grew up as a Spurs fan, and they lost 2-0 and never got a shot on target. But
that makes sense.
There's always next week is Don Belle's turn, right?
Yeah, well, he's going to pick one up, isn't he? He's getting the getting the medal, isn't he?
They're going to win it.
They need 1 point, right? 1 point, I think, to guarantee it.
This is Spurs' selling point. Surely this is our selling point.
It's got to be.
Come to Spurs, and when we get rid of you in 2 or 3 years, you are guaranteed to win a trophy.
100%. We've got a massive track record on this.
And it doesn't matter which championship or which team you go to.
No, you're a winner.
Very good. So, in summary, everyone we're being linked with is pretty good. And we shouldn't really overly worry about who we get next. They've all got pros and cons.
There's still Brendan Rodgers lurking around.
No, except for him.
Behave.
Sorry, lads, but just wanted to clarify.
I think there'll be a queue of people got the
No, he's underrated, Jim. He's underrated. He speaks very highly of you, by the way.
I've always hated him so much.
You haven't mentioned it, though.
Oh, God.
A little bit like DJ Perisic.
Yeah, he's my Perisic.
I'm having a bit of a heel turn on Perisic, if I'm being honest.
Oh, I know.
Yeah. I feel like he is being put in a position where he's not set up to fail.
You've just seen the pictures of him topless now, haven't you, Deej? And you're getting all...
No, I just see the hair. That's all I need.
There's no place for that 80s curly perm with the frosty tips. I'm not having it.
God.
No. But that was
keep him in. Let him teach you Dogi how to cross and send him on a free next summer. I don't care.
Very good.
That's what I want to do with him.
Just before we finish, just a shout out for the Cheeseroom, though. If you are a podcast listener and you want to hear more of HG, who is our awesome guest today, I would strongly advise it. It's on YouTube, the podcast channels, Spotify, Google Pods, everything. So you'll find it on whatever you want. Don't know, Deej, if you wanted to plug your Twitter handle or anything like that. Sorry, HG. Sorry.
A Twitter handle.
Twitter handle or anything like that.
Cheeseroom Spurs is the main, but obviously I think Caller has his own. I have my own. Mine is Spurs Fan HG. But I think the Cheeseroom the YouTube is 2 or 3 times a week, depending on what's going on, and then the pod is after every game. So right now, sadly, only once a week. But we've been going for about 5 years. We started the season, we got to the CL final, and it's been a lot of fun. We made a lot of friends doing it.
Cool.
I was going to say I can guess when you started by the name. The mysterious Cheeseroom. But thanks for coming on again, HG.
Yeah, cheers, mate.
And up the Spurs.
Yeah.
No can you Spurs?
Just say, if you do one on Ange Postecoglou.
Yeah, we've talked about Ange. We've talked about Ange.
Do we want to quickly mention Ange before we finish? Because Johnny's a fanboy. It sounds like you're a bit of a fanboy as well.
I think I like Ange a lot.
Size a fanboy, okay. And
I'd be more than happy with him.
The conclusion we had in the last pod, for anyone who hasn't listened, is he's a very powerful character who's very good at installing a culture around a club of everyone. That kind of stereotypical Fergie thing of even the kit man feels like they're part of the team. You know what I mean? And everyone wants to win. And that's an area Spurs desperately need, and the culture of the club's not where it should be. But did you have anything else to add, HG, on why you like Ange as a manager?
Just that, like, if we're talking about what I said before about what I want a manager to be at Spurs, I don't see anyone out there, certainly who speaks English, that is better than Postecoglou. I really don't. Like, Marcelo Gallardo could come close, but that would be more of a gamble. But for Postecoglou, like, to me, like, I'm not looking for the next 5 to 10 year manager. I'm really not. I'm looking for someone that will turn the ship around, and kind of like what Martignol did back in 2005. We only had him for 2.5 seasons, but it felt like such a great time to be a Spurs fan. And if Postecoglou did that again for Spurs, and it'd be lovely if he stayed longer, but that's what I think we need. Someone who's going to say, this is what we need to be, this is how we're going to do it, and actually starts the course. And maybe later on someone else will take that on. But we look what Brighton did with Potter. right? They gave up on Houghton and they said, we want to be this kind of football club. And Potter was there for 3-4 seasons, but he turned the club around, and now they've got De Zerbi, and they look like being a top 10 club for the foreseeable future. I think that's what Spurs, I mean, we want to be more than top 10, but I think that kind of attitude is what we need at the top, and Postecoglou is probably the best man available.
Interesting.
I love his phrase, "We never stop." His phrase is "We never stop," and it's just like, oh, I love that. Just the power and the positivity and the sense of expectation. Like words are powerful, and leaders and personalities make such a difference. And he has really transformed Celtic. I know it's a 2-horse race over in Scotland, but the level of passion and adoration that and the connection he has with his players and the supporters is off the charts. It's like, I've always preferred Celtic to Rangers in terms of the Old Firm, and obviously hoping that my little minnows can do a job in them in June in the final. But so he's done an incredible job. I mean, he's kind of been in there. He's been kind of mentioned peripherally, but I don't know if Scott Munn's Australian connection would have any bearing on his consideration or not. But I guess it comes back to what we said earlier regarding, the profile manager that Levy kind of prefers to go with, and I'm just probably certainly not going to satisfy a lot of fans who don't know anything about Ange. But like those of us here who have a bit more of a clue, clearly there's quite a lot to like about him.
But he could be on the par with the other the other two that we talked about though. Okay, Nagelsmann's Nagelsmann would be that high profile signing. We get that. But the other two that we talked about, I think Postecoglou could be in that envelope without a shadow of doubt. Yeah. If you look up online, there's some videos of him on the training ground, and you just listen to the dialogue he's having with the players in some of the sessions that he's running. And you just think to yourself, they really don't want to fuck about with him. They know where they stand with him. He stamps his mark on the session. And you know that you've got to give everything for him.
Does anyone know if he's got any connection with Munn?
He's Australian. He's Australian, isn't he? He was at Melbourne Victory when Munn was at the RB, the Melbourne City. So they were opposite each other, but they because Munn's Australian, isn't he? And Postecoglou's Australian, so they must have moved in the similar circles, without a doubt.
Look, I might be wrong, but I think that the Japanese team that he was
Yokohama
might be in the City group.
It might be part of their might have been part of that Far East group. Yeah. Okay.
Interesting.
So I do think there are more links than just nationality, but again, I might be wrong. But I do think I've read that Yokohama is part of
there you go.
But it's just like, to me, like of the 4 managers now, that if we've thrown Postecoglou in, I'd have Postecoglou top of that list, really. And then after that, I'd probably go for Slot before Nagelsmann.
Yeah.
But I think Svensson is very much the outsider of them because it's only been 2 and a bit seasons. But really, like if you're looking at what I think Spurs need, and this is I understand this is not what Levy's looking at. Levy's probably got Rodgers second or third on his list, right? But
don't say
that. That was a nervous laugh rather than a contradictory laugh.
Yeah. Won the FA Cup with Leicester, won a whole bunch with Celtic. He's been in the league for a long time. Should have won the league with Liverpool. There's a whole bunch there that you can say, but no.
No.
That's it. No more. No.
Do we think De Zerbi is completely out of the running now?
I haven't heard anything from him in weeks. I mean, obviously it doesn't mean anything because we're pretty quiet with our managers, but
the major one
feels
really
like
is... Go on, sorry. Dude, finish off.
I was going to say, it feels like his little rant against Delaney kind of removed himself from.
Yeah, he's fallen down the list to 10th according to the bookies. Ange is ahead of him. Weirdly, Graham Potter's now 5th favourite. Brendan Rodgers is 3rd favourite. I think you guys are right. Because the thing is with Daniel, this just sums up. This is why I want a director of football in place to choose the manager. This is why I want to get director of football sorted first, because Daniel is a very clever guy, but he will look at everything from like a spreadsheet. Like you just said, HG, but like, this guy did X, Y, and Z in the SPL. He did X, Y, and Z in the Premier League. Therefore, he's a logical point on paper without taking the bigger, without the whole context of Leicester players saying he destroyed the culture of the club, ripped the fabric out of the dressing room, sacked every good member of staff that disagreed with him. Like, I don't think Levy really focuses on the human aspect
Yeah.
of these appointments. That's the issue with him. But anyway, we better wrap up because we're an hour and 10, so we're over. But up the Spurs.
Come on, you
And,
Spurs.
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 Come on, you